There we go. And howdy, howdy, folks. Welcome to Atheist on Air Beyond the Trailer Park. And we are at episode 195. We're getting closer to that big 200. But hey, stop that, you little monster. My cat's biting my armpit.
You said that, and the camera jumped to Morgan right there for like no reason.
But yeah, tonight we're I see. Yeah, it's my cat. He's big enough he can reach me from the floor. He's like a huge fucking cat, and he likes. Yeah, but he likes to bite right here.
Yeah, because he's a cougar.
Yeah, well, it doesn't feel so good when you're live on air trying to talk and your cat's clinging onto your arm. But anyways, tonight we're going to do another news segment. Regretfully, I had a few possible guests, but the confirmations didn't come through. So last week, Steve was whining, joking in the chat that I should have him on again. And so I PM'd him or whatever you do on Twitter. Direct message.
Slid in them DMs.
Yeah,
the original guest falls through. I'm your guy.
Yeah. Well, I had a bunch of different ones lined up, and I have certain people I do keep in my mind as background, but I didn't think soon enough to have you on last week, and by then I didn't see your message until after the show.
I saw you doing the news. I was like, hey, what the?
Yeah, so we have with us again Atheist News, Steve DiMarco, and
now at over 1,000 subscribers.
Excellent. And
congratulations.
Thank you.
He's a fellow YouTuber who does Atheist News.
On top of many other types of videos.
Yeah, but so we're going to bullshit about some news today. And knowing us three, we'll probably go way off on the deep end, but that's okay. So we have.
Well, to anyone who skips through the stream, if they watch this at some other time, they're watching it now, and then if they skip ahead, we'll be talking about mermaids for some reason. So you really have to stay through the whole thing to really follow what's going on.
Yeah, you do. Or it somehow makes sense. It all comes back together, but, it's a journey getting there.
And then arguing about whether Beverly Hills Cop was better than Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when all of us did the interview with, I think it was Robert Stanley, and we started out talking about dominionism, then we went totally off tangent, and we ended up back on dominionism. Do you remember that, Morgan?
Yes.
It's like we started with one thing, totally off tangent, and came right back around, and it led right back into dominionism. So it was kind of funny. So
tied up in the bow.
Yeah. But with us tonight, as usual, is Miss Morgan. How are you doing, my dear?
Hey, doing well.
Good.
Now, every time you introduce Morgan, there's one thing I have to know. Why doesn't the musical sting from Law and Order, just play right there?
It needs to. We don't have the rights to that music.
You would get like copyright.
Oh yeah, that would be.
That's true too. I just thought about that.
Yeah, it'd be copyright, and this idiot over here has totally like foobarred her XSplit, so I haven't had time to fiddle with it because I'm down rabbit holes that.
Oh, so you're not like the radio DJ sound effect guy on the side who's got like.
No, I'm lucky I can get our guests on the show and people can hear us.
My computer would explode if I downloaded XSplit, so.
Yeah. The only reason I have XSplit is I purposely, when I ordered this computer, it's almost 2 years old now, but I purposely upped the RAM and all the technical bullshit so I could run XSplit eventually, but then
there's a cheaper route. You just get a friend who can sit off to the side of the camera and make all the sound effects right then and there.
Are you bucking for a job, Steve?
No, I'm not like very talented, so I couldn't do that.
Way to sell yourself.
I have a very, very fragile, tiny ego, so I put myself down a lot.
Well, you won't get away with that on our show. So,
No.
hey, Tris, question for you since you're out in the audience there. Am I too loud? Because I was listening through some videos of past shows, and I sound like I'm always screaming. And I'm wondering if I have my personal sound up too high.
No, I mean, I would. The real telltale sign is if you hear that overload from the mic.
Yeah, I'm not getting that.
If you don't hear that, you're fine.
Okay. And she said, they say, nope, things are good. Okay, it just might be me because for all the years I've been doing, whether on YouTube, well, Google, or just audio when I did my old radio shows, I hated listening to my own voice. And I think all of us go through that as YouTubers and podcasters. It's like there's nothing worse than editing your own voice because you always think you sound horrid. In my case, most of the time I do. But okay, so at least we know I'm not screaming at y'all because I don't want it to be that way. So, Morgan, what news do you have for us this week?
Oh, what news do I have? I mean,
should I say what news don't you have? Would that be
I
safer?
mean, where do I even begin? Truly. I mean, everything from like Trump being like the moon is part of Mars, which I have my own theory about that. I think someone told him. So I've noticed this happens every time. Y'all shut up. I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. But every time something like happens, I feel like they release some information about aliens that nobody pays attention to. Like they're like, yeah, Project Blue Book was a total thing, but it was the same day that like Paul Manafort got indicted or something. So like nobody gave a fuck.
Well,
And it was like in the New York Times. It wasn't like the National Enquirer. And then recently, it basically came out that there was a reporting program that they'd done for Navy pilots. Now, I'm not saying it's aliens or whatever, but it's basically they were like, "Hey, we're just seeing some weird shit," and it's more than just one person. And I didn't want to say anything because I thought I was crazy, but then I was talking to my buddy, and turns out he's seeing the same thing. So they now have like a reporting procedure that's that they have to do, and I feel like maybe someone told Trump too much, and this is why, but not enough. So maybe this is why he's all like, we got to have a space force, because before he showed zero interest in space. And I'm like, they told him just enough to be dangerous, I feel like, or that something is going on, or I don't know. I mean, I'm half joking here, but also, yeah, his whole like, oh, we need to go back to the moon, which is part of Mars. And I'm like, is someone fucking with him? Like, what's happening?
I have two theories, and Steve, jump in whenever.
One is that Pence is more involved with NASA than Trump is.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I honestly think,
which is a bizarre. It doesn't. It's never really fit to me, but okay. All I know is what cracks me up is that the conservative Oklahoma politician who was appointed the head of NASA had to look at all the data and say, yes, climate change is real. He had to change his position after becoming the head of NASA and having access to all the information. This Oklahoma, which is super into gas and oil, even that guy had to look at the data and say, no, actually, climate change is real.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if he was like, because there are some people that would have had that position who still would have said, no, it's not real, just because. But
yeah. I mean,
fake news.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see it right now, but I think quietly, like they might personify one thing publicly, but privately they believe the exact opposite. But they have
the Trump administration just this week stopped someone from testifying to Congress about how imminent the problems are about to become.
Yes, yeah, they've been changing. They've been, well, sometimes quietly, sometimes not so quietly, changing how their press releases are released, what words they're allowed to use or not allowed to use, there's stuff like that. But as far as the whole Mars is part of the moon bullshit, I honestly do think that he probably misspoke. but
Mistweeted.
yeah,
In the middle of an Adderall snort.
Gosh.
but
I mean, something. He was snorting an awful lot in that debate.
haven't. The only problem I have with that notion, and I have seen really no attempts at correcting it. I mean, from his side. Usually,
because it's like one of those things where you're like, do we even bother? Like, you know,
yeah,
it's like
you would think if he honestly
all his
did
aides,
if he honestly did misspeak, which is possible. I mean, one pundit I heard say, well, the moon mission is part of the Mars mission, or supposed to be, or something.
Or maybe he was half listening and was like, oh, the moon is part of it, which is what I think happened, because he doesn't listen and he doesn't
Right.
like, he's the most like, he's the least intellectually curious.
about Mars's moons, because Phobos and Deimos were part of Mars.
Right. Well, so the moon was part of Earth as well.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what he meant.
I don't think that's what he meant either.
Level.
Yeah, but you would think if he honestly misspoke, that someone immediately after would say, hey, no, this is what he meant to say, but it came out kind of cockeyed.
No, dear leader makes no mistakes.
I have not seen, even now, I haven't been paying a lot of attention, but I haven't seen anything.
He didn't misspeak, the reason I think he is truly believing that for some reason is the fact that if he did misspeak, he would have sent out a follow-up tweet that says, fake news, trying to mess with my words again, you know, but he didn't do that either.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so are you fucking serious? But I think you brought up a good point, Morgan. He is the most intellectually not curious.
Yeah, he's so like, if I was a president, because Jonathan and I were having this conversation the other day, and it was just like, man, if I was president, like I would be so like, Jonathan was like, I wouldn't sleep because of all the information I would have access to. Like, I would want to know everything. Like, you have the best intelligence on every aspect of everything, and you know, I would want to just sit there and just learn, you know, before doing anything. And then meanwhile, this guy just like does not care about it. Like, he'd rather go golfing. And I'm like, what the like, even if you're a douchebag and an awful person, like, he doesn't even care enough to like just find this information out, or to, you know, secretly be learning about this but publicly saying another thing, like you were saying. And the thing is, I am kind of seeing that shift to where, you know, okay, yeah, climate change is real, but that's just, you know, the natural cycles of the earth, or, you know, it's not man-made is the term, you know, it's the little catchphrase, or there's nothing we can do about it, so drill baby drill.
I have to say it's a good thing he's not learning all this information, because he would completely misinterpret it, say it to the public, everyone would get super confused or read something completely wrong, and it just wouldn't, even if he wanted to learn this stuff, his mind probably couldn't grasp it, and he would immediately get it all wrong and send wrong information out.
I mean, that's true, but at the same time, it's just like mind-boggling that he's not even like trying to find anything out, even if he were to get it all wrong. But
I've been kind of resurrecting one of my old, not old, but groups that I haven't really paid attention to. It's called
You mean like Jesus?
Huh?
You mean like Jesus?
Yeah.
Beth is resurrecting all the time.
But I have a group I called I Science Do You, and basically what it started out as, I would find all these interesting, intriguing, intellectually curiosity type articles that I was running out of room, so I just threw them in this group for other people to read as well, instead of just cluttering up my news feed, because I do post quite a bit some days. And I've been going back through, kind of keywording them, so if people wanted to find information, there would at least be a starting point, and yada yada. And I've been fiddling around with that, and I'm thinking, God, just in my news group, I have more fucking information than I think Trump has in his brain. I mean, it's like...
I mean, truly. Oh, and I have another report from NOAA, actually, that I got today. So I used to work, full disclosure, used to work for Sea Grant, which is a program of NOAA's, though we do get independent funding as well. So basically, what's happening here is, speaking of, that the Trump administration stopping people from testifying about climate change, its effects being imminent. So every year they go through and they predict how big the hypoxic zone is going to be in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is also called the dead zone. So essentially, it's a huge ass algae bloom that happens, and it kills off a lot of fish. If the fisheries are affected, it can also cause people to get sick, depending on the type and how severe it is. I'm sure y'all heard about the red tide type stuff that was happening in Florida a while back. It's kind of similar to that, except for this is algae. And so basically what it does is it, essentially chokes the oxygen out of everything. But so they're predicting that it's going to be the size of Massachusetts this year.
Oh, wow.
It's on the Gulf Coast because what happens is all these farmers, up in states like Iowa and Illinois and everything, all their agricultural runoff is running into the Mississippi River, so it gets down to us. It all collects down by us, and it's not necessarily that we're taking better care of our waters per se, but they have more farms up there,
Right.
and it's all their waste that, and then it becomes our problem. And we have no recourse against them for that, but because they don't care, because they're not having to deal with it.
Right.
It's our fishermen that are getting screwed. Their farmers are fine as long as they can keep throwing shit in the river. Mm-hmm. So they're doing this whole thing where it's going to be the size of Massachusetts. It's basically choking out everything, and they say the reason partially why it's so big is not just the pollution, but it's because of all the flooding that's happened. All that flooding up in Nebraska and all that flooding up in the Midwest is just causing all this agricultural runoff to run into the Mississippi.
Right, which makes sense.
Inevitably. And then, down here, we've been getting rain constantly, too. So, there are parts of Mississippi that got 13 inches.
Wow.
The other week. So when people are talking about, climate change, and it's not real, and, oh, it's not going to affect me, yes, it is.
Yeah.
I want to add to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
One is how devastated the area was because of the major hurricanes that have hit in the past 10 years in that area. Mm-hmm. You see how much that affected, like the shrimping and fishing and all that. The other significant impact that area had is all the oil spills, which is still recovering from all that. So you got a situation where oil that got dumped that is still in there,
and we've had multiple oil spills since.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you got all these major storms that are going to be swirling around that algae bloom and the oil. There's multiple factors that are going to make it so bad.
And then the red tide, which, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, with the whole...
you mean that conservative wave that was supposed to affect the last election cycle?
Yeah. But it's gotten so bad that I remember... when I first started with Sea Grant, I was tasked with basically briefing a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals opinion. So Court of Appeals being, of course, a step down from the Supreme Court. And Fifth Circuit is Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So as you can imagine, they are the most liberal circuit we have. No, I'm kidding. But they're one of the most conservative circuits we have.
Coming into the courtroom on horses.
Oh, yeah. They are, as... probably almost, I would say, one of the most conservative. Like, if you're a criminal defendant, you might as well just stop. But
they fire a gun.
Oh yeah, that's how they do it. But yeah, it was one of the judges. Somebody was saying, if you want to practice your argument in front of them, just whip yourself with barbed wire, because that's what it's going to feel like when you present it. So yeah, yikes. But even the Fifth Circuit, were like, because this group was trying to sue to basically get the EPA to act and to basically do something about this dead zone. And they said, well, we've given, the regulations and everything. It's up to the states to follow them. And it's up to the states to basically determine what kind of regulations they want within our perimeters. And if it's not working, then it's up to the state to decide that they need to be more stringent. They didn't want to have to be policing, because then people will be like, oh, here comes the big EPA. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of people, when they talk about these regulations and everything, they don't realize, because the boards that are responsible for these regulations that they call, it's like the big bad EPA coming in and everything, you have to pull their teeth to get them to do a lot of stuff. I mean, it's
in a way
yeah.
though, I feel like that might be sharpening your skills.
Yeah. In
Well,
a way.
I
Yeah, but the whole thing is even the Fifth Circuit said there will come a time basically when the EPA can come in and say y'all aren't doing enough because this problem has gotten so out of hand, but we're not going to say what that is right now. So essentially doing this thing courts like to do a lot where they just kind of punt the football, as I call it, it's somebody else's problem. We don't want to cause a
well,
thing.
this is the issue, like using climate change as the example, is that so many normal everyday Joes, don't or aren't aware of exactly what climate change is and what it entails and what the ramifications are. And then you have, on one side, you have those that lean towards the sciences and that accept the consensus that climate change is a problem. Then you have those on the other side, and not necessarily just Republicans or conservatives. I know quite a few so-called liberals, if that's the right term, we'll say left side, that fall into this category, that totally deny that it's happening. Some deny that it's even happening, and some deny even the science. I mean, you have it with the whole GMO issue. You have it with vaccines. And it's this whole anti-science. And then you throw in the quote conspiracy of, Big Brother.
It's global warming. Why is it cold outside? Kind of mentality too.
That mentality. It's like,
climate,
I
weather
just
different.
hit a snowball in May, and it's like, well, fuck, it was snowing on my birthday in 1977. That was the year of the blizzard in Buffalo, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we had snow last year here in Pennsylvania, like May 11th, I believe it was. And it's like, it was the day I broke my fucking ankle. Because it was icy out in the middle of fucking May, and I wasn't expecting ice in May. Stepped out of the car and broke my ankle.
Yeah, because people don't know the difference between climate and weather, and again, don't bother to find out. Like,
and how, I mean, a lot of people might, well, what does this have to do with atheism? Well, it's like when you have the religious right pandering to the philosophy that they're intentionally trying to, with their policies, trying to force the second coming, yeah, we have a problem.
yeah, or the fact that, oh, well, it's okay because we'll all go to heaven if climate change kills all of us. No, it's not okay because I don't believe in heaven like I would like to live. So
yeah, so I mean, there is a crossover between when you allow your religious beliefs to determine what you do or do not accept in science. I mean,
lack of critical thinking is really what it boils down to. That too.
It's lack of critical thinking. But I was when I was going through some of the articles in my group, a lot of them have to do with science communication. And one article I came across basically was saying that how we discuss it, and they were talking about different ways of doing it. Bringing these ideas to to fruition to get people to understand. I mean, there's so many different tactics. The whole Streisand effect, and I get that a lot because I am a very fact-based, science-based thinker. Everything I do is hopefully informed by what science says. I mean, okay, yeah, I smoke. Okay, so I'm a little anti-science there, but
well, you're not saying like smoking doesn't do anything and it's actually good for you, and I have a smooth Winston cigarette.
Well, and that's the thing, that's actually one of the tropes that your science denialists bring up, is that, well, science was wrong before, and they go to
well, no, they weren't. They were saying cigarettes were bad for you, and the companies were suppressing it, much like what's happening now. Is they're saying climate change is real, and companies are suppressing it.
Yeah.
Now, what bothers me is the whole, oh, don't worry about that. It's the real problem is these wind farms. They're killing our birds.
Yeah, or
I have never ever like ever come across an environmental case where it was like, now, Morgan, we got to do something. These wetland birds are just like getting slaughtered over here in these windmills.
Finite amount of air or wind.
Or if the Earth ever stopped rotating, we wouldn't have wind. I mean, some of the stuff.
Yeah, it's like I think we'd have bigger things to worry about if the Earth stopped rotating.
Yeah, like we'd all fly off in a heartbeat. But yeah, it's like there's just, like you said, there's just a lack of critical thinking, and that goes back to our education system.
Yeah, or they make up scenarios so absurd that they're not likely to happen, to show how smart they are. This happened a lot when I was in law school. These people who would ask. Oh, there I am. Okay. They would ask some crazy hypothetical that, would never in a million years happen. And they'd be like, well, when did this happen? And it's just
that
like,
extra
dude,
step they take.
Like,
not only do they say, oh, climate change isn't dangerous or it isn't real, it's attacking things like wind farms or solar panels, just to take that extra step to not only try and argue their case, but to go against the evidence for the other and just come up with the most bizarre reasons.
Yeah, and basically be like, look how smart I am. I figured out that when it's nighttime, a solar panel won't work. Checkmate, libs. And it's like, what? Do you not know how anything works? Like, how do you walk outside and not get hit by a car? Like, it's astounding how, and I'm like, did you think that anybody would think this was a smart argument?
That could be a comment right there.
No, I think he literally has said that. He has said, like, what are you going to do at nighttime? And I'm just like, dumbass, that's not how solar panels freaking work. It's like a battery. You know what a battery is, right? And it's like, Jesus. I mean, I don't know what else to do, but at this point, it's like, you can't even argue with them because you don't want to give them, a platform basically to look like, oh, well, I say that windmills aren't killing birds, but they say they are. Who's to say? You don't want to get into that situation, but it's
both sides have good arguments.
Find people on both sides.
But I think that's funny because I look at it. I mean, I went to a public school. I went to a fairly good public school. We were always, when I was in school, we were rated in like the top 25 within the state, and I think the top 100 in the nation. I had some really good teachers, and yeah, I did go on to college, but I like totally bombed out. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I sucked at college all 8 years. So if that gives you an idea. But I've always, I think one of the biggest things my teachers back in high school and junior high, etc., always instilled in not just me, but in the entire class is curiosity. I could go for hours just paging through, well, I'll use Wikipedia as an example before they went totally bonkers, but as a starting point, I'd go through, well, what's this all about? If I don't know something or don't know what it is.
I kind of like it when Wikipedia goes off the rails a bit, like when Warren G. Harding's middle name was Gangsta.
I like it when it's stuff like that, like when it's funny.
Yeah, I don't like to see misinformation.
Insidious misinformation is, I think, different than like, somebody doing a funny prank.
Yeah, but it's like I've always been curious my entire life. I mean, if there's something I didn't know or didn't understand or didn't know what it was, like I know this is kind of an off the wall example, but the Rife machine. I was on another friend's podcast. This was probably 6 years ago, and one of the callers was a Rife machine person. Believed in the Rife machine. I'm like, what the fuck is the Rife machine?
Oh.
I mean, I'm just using that as an example. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it was like, what the hell is it? So I spent like 3 days looking up the Rife machine just because I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand what it was and stuff like that. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of, with today is that people do not have that curiosity to, at least get a basic knowledge of something or to go deeper.
All right. Here's the thing. See, my school, my public school was also in the top 25 in my state. However, that was because I went to public school in Delaware, so I probably only had about 25 schools in the whole state. And I also did not go to college because my grades were good enough and I had no money. However, that never stopped my curiosity or
Exactly.
my interest. Even when I started Atheist News, the first year of Atheist News in the news with religion and atheist-related news was science news. After that first year, I spun it out of that weekly show I did, and now once a month I do science news. And it only gets me about half the views that my atheist news videos get. However, it's got still a very large amount of people who look forward to it every month because science, I do it from all different fields of science. And it's still just as interesting to atheists who watch atheist news because I always say that science itself is the backbone of atheism. There's proof, there's evidence, and you can learn from it and satisfy curiosities with it.
Yeah. And I think that's why, I mean, like, as I was telling you before the show, I've had to kind of back off the political aspect because I've discovered it, especially since my strokes, that, yeah, it does depress the fuck out of me. And, you know, I'm a news junkie. I live for the news.
The only thing that depresses me about science is I tell people this, is that I happen to be born in the wrong generation because I feel like 100 years from now, they can probably figure out how to put brains into robots.
Yeah.
And then I would just live forever. So I just
I don't want to live forever, that's for sure.
But in a robot body, come on.
No, doesn't interest me.
I don't want to be a transformer. Turn into like a car.
But yeah, it's like that lack of curiosity is getting drowned out by, for lack of better words, politics. It's like, you know, if we let science inform our decisions, I think things would be, I won't say totally different, but it'd be better. I mean, you know, case in point, the availability of insulin. Here in our country, we're paying about $2,000 a month. I might have my numbers wrong. For those that are type 1 diabetics.
I mean, you're not wrong on that aspect.
Yeah, Colorado just passed a law to cap how much they could charge for it.
$100, yeah.
I think it's like $200 a vial or something.
Yeah, but here in this country, it's $2,000. The exact same medication. I can't remember where I think it was AOC actually brought this up in one of the hearings. It's only like $200. It's the same fucking medication, 2 different countries.
Yeah, and also the man who invented insulin, or who discovered it rather from, you know, animals, charged. He didn't charge a patent. He didn't patent it because he was like, why would I? He said, you can't patent the sun. Is what he said, which when I heard that he said that, it's just like I burst into tears. But he's like, you can't patent the sun. Like, it's something that needs to benefit everyone.
Yeah. And
I'm just the dude who happened to discover it. And now people are just like, you know, now that these pharmaceutical companies have gotten a hold of it, they're gouging people left and right. And it's,
I mean, my medications for a month, and this includes my blood pressure medication and some of the other stuff, and my diet. I'm not insulin dependent. I take metformin and I don't know what else, a bunch of other shit. And for me, just to get my medication, now I am on Medicaid, so I don't pay for full price. I have a $1 or $2 copay. But without my insurance, it would cost me almost $3,000 a month just to live. Because especially without my high blood pressure medication, I would probably stroke out again.
Yeah, but mine would be about $650 a month.
Yeah, I mean, and that's crazy. I mean, I have friends that are over in Europe, not necessarily the UK, but for similar medications, some of the brands aren't available over there. They're paying like $200. And one friend's on pretty much everything the same thing that I take, except for one pill. And she pays like
a website that gathers all this information and makes it like a really easy map to click on and compare. That would be really. to see.
Oh, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, but I mean, like I know even like if I were to go up to Canada, it wouldn't cost me near as much. Even down
I
in
was just
Mexico.
this weekend.
Oh, cool. I gotta
First
get.
time I ever left the country.
Yeah, but I used to live in Hamilton for a while. But yeah, it's like it I guess you could call it capitalism at its best.
Depends on who is
Yeah,
who you are. If you're a
who's
CEO, then yeah, it's
yeah.
capitalism at its best.
But yeah, and that all came out of Trump saying that the moon is part of Mars or Mars is part of the moon. So, Steve, what do you got for us?
In terms of the news itself, I mean, I can bring up a bunch of different news stories that I just talked about on the last episode. There are more silly ones that I won't bother bringing up, like literally 30 people arrested for yoga class.
I didn't hear this one.
The sillier the better. We like silly. We like
we do like a mix of that to lighten things up.
Yeah, sometimes we get too deep.
The silliest one last week was about in a place in Iran. They held yoga class, and the police raided it and arrested 30 people, including the teacher. And it's not that yoga itself is illegal, and I was like, Zumba is actually illegal in Iran, by the way, but yoga is considered a mixed sport because they had men and women in the class, and even though Iranian women are fully clothed in yoga, like they wear the full head to toe dress, they can't be in mixed sports together. Mm-hmm. So that's how they justified that mass arrest for yoga.
Yeah.
Then there's in Canada, in Winnipeg, another one that was kind of like wild is a grocery store owner got a $10,000 fine in Canada for being open on Good Friday, because apparently in Manitoba it's illegal for grocery stores to be open on the religious holiday. However, casinos and cannabis stores can be open on Good Friday.
Casino can, but you can't buy groceries. It's kind of like, it reminds me of a Mississippi mentality about our casinos. All ours are either in Tunica or in Vicksburg or on the coast. So I have a joke that I'm like, well, Jesus can't see you gamble if you're on the water.
Well, a lot of people were like, wait a minute, if you get the munchies from going to the cannabis store, where are you gonna go?
Yeah.
That's reminiscent of the old blue laws. I remember back in the 70s, the big
North Dakota still has a massive blue law.
Oh, there's still quite a few out there, but
yeah, we have them. But
we used to have still open. We used to have a store called Two Guys, kind of like Kmart, Ames, were they were more of a regional store, and they wanted to open on Sundays. Well, at the time, no stores were open on Sundays. I mean, it was Sunday. The streets rolled up, and this was in the suburb of Buffalo. And I remember the stink that went about when Two Guys, and there was a couple other stores that wanted to open on Sundays.
Oh, there's a drive-through daiquiri place that's open on Sundays, but it's funny because they still have a city ordinance that I can't order a mimosa before noon. What is it, 10:30 a.m. on Sundays? Oh no, Oxford's different because we're a town full of drunks. So
yeah, I know it's here.
Yeah, so Oxford is kind of like a weird exception in Mississippi, but we still do have them. Like, obviously liquor stores are closed on Sunday, but a grocery store being closed on Good Friday, like even here, Walmart's open on Good Friday. Like, that's bonkers. I couldn't imagine I'm getting a $10,000 fine. Like, that's like a federal regulatory fine. Like, that's crazy.
Oh, there's a good topic for a show: crazy blue laws.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have them as much because we have a drive-through daiquiri place. Like, literally, the dude hands you a cup of alcohol as you drive through.
I know. How are the police not staking this place?
Yeah.
Well, this is what I've heard. I don't know if this is true or not, because I haven't. I meant to look it up at some point, and my statutory codes, but it slipped my mind. But I hear there's a law that, well, it's in Mississippi. I guess it's not that there is a law, it's just that there isn't a law that says you cannot drink while you drive. But you can't be drunk while you drive.
Oh, a distinction.
Well, I know when the drinking driving issue was really, really hot in the 90s, early or late 90s-ish. Theoretically, there are laws that you cannot drink any beverage while you're driving.
Oh, there are laws where, like, because in Oxford, like, for instance, like, if I were to get pulled over and say you just refuse it, then yeah, you just go to jail and you get charged, and they don't. And it was something I've learned, if at my little law firm, the law doesn't fucking matter.
True.
Yeah, it doesn't fucking matter. Not when you're dealing with, like, lower court stuff. Yeah. Especially, it matters less then.
Well, I know here in town, when my nephew was still alive, you are not allowed to skateboard in the business district, which is about a block long.
Because skateboarding's a sin. Jesus don't like it.
Well, it probably has its origination in that, but I don't know the origination of this ordinance. Well, he was given a citation for having his skateboard when he was crossing our main street, which is 4th Street, which runs right in front of my house. He was at the crosswalk, everything else was legal, but he had his skateboard, and this one cop who had a thing for my nephew, not a good thing either, he just didn't like him, gave him a ticket. And it was a pretty outdated law, so my nephew decided he was going to, quote, defend himself.
Oh, no.
And, it gets real nice. So he did some background research on these so-called bullshit laws and discovered that in where he lives, which was South Park, which is right in the borough, that black people were not allowed to walk down the center walkway in South Park. Basically, instead of a street dividing the houses, it was just a walkway, and then there were kind of the backwards, your backyard is actually your front yard. So there's a center walkway, and then the streets, the houses are here. My hands aren't even showing. But basically, people of color, primarily black people, were not allowed to walk on the center walkways in South Park without an escort, so to speak. This law obviously was from the 1940s, 1950s, but it never had been repealed. Now, we don't have a very high number of African Americans living in this community. I think there's like maybe 4. So obviously his law has never been an issue. So he went in front of the judge, and they brought up the charges about the skateboard, and he goes, well, if you're going to enforce this, then you need to enforce this law. And the judge looked at him like, oh, fuck. He didn't even know about it. And the judge has been a judge here in where I live for probably 30 years. He threw the case out of court.
Yeah, just like,
it's like, so yeah, there's some really stupid laws still on the books in a lot of these small towns and boroughs and
asshole cops everywhere. But yeah, I mean, because, obviously somebody gave that store in Winnipeg the citation, but yeah, that's just bonkers.
Yeah.
There's still like, because it's like, again, it's like with religious people, that's fine. You don't want to drink on Good Friday. That's fine. You don't want to go grocery shopping on Good Friday. But what if other people do?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, for the longest time, I used to work 3rd shift. So my week would start on a Sunday night at 11 o'clock and end on a Friday morning. So my weekends were a little bit skewed, but before stores started opening 24 hours, when I was still living in Buffalo and Boston, I was shit out of luck. I couldn't. I would have to interrupt my sleep to go grocery shopping or run errands or whatever I needed to do because nobody was open. Now, granted, there's some places that 24-hour stores are just like totally pointless, like where I live now. I mean, okay, yeah, I love the fact that Sheetz is open 24 hours, or like one well, the post office and then Sheetz, but it's like I don't see the reason for someone like DG to be open 24 hours because they wouldn't get the customers. In my area. Now somewhere else they might. So it's like I think it should be up to the individual stores to determine when and how long they're open. I mean, it's crazy. I
It's about enforcing a law on everyone
mean,
that shouldn't apply to everyone, and that's the issue to me.
yeah. So this one's probably going to turn some heads, and I still don't quite understand the whole thing, and I'm hoping that you, Morgan, might be able to shed some light on this.
We'll see.
Headline, and yes,
All right, here's where you put in a card where it's like Morgan's legal expertise.
No, do not take advice from a legal podcast to quote opening arguments.
Well,
do not. Don't drink while you're driving in Mississippi. I don't know if that's a thing you can do, and even if it is, probably not a good idea.
I like Morgan's.
Morgan says it's legal.
Yeah, not so much because of her legal mind, but she's more in tune with shit than I am. 20 years for giving water to migrants, a religious freedom case of little interest to the religion freedom industry.
I like how they call it an industry, though, and it's calling it what it is. Well, yes.
This headline is from Rewire News, so they are more liberal leaning. But I guess what it is
rework that headline into a BuzzFeed article.
Well, I think they're actually related, so.
Top 10 ways that religious right people don't care about
religious rights. Okay. I guess what the story's about is a gentleman left water on or near the border for migrants crossing so they wouldn't dehydrate to death, and he was caught, and I guess doing such is against the law.
Oh yeah, they threw the book at him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what I'm missing. I mean, how, and Steve, you chime in as well, is how is this a religious rights issue?
Because from my understanding is that these people are, of a religious mindset that they, they're helping, others basically, okay, which is what they believe that Jesus called them to do.
Right.
They're making sure that these women and children and these migrants aren't, dying of dehydration out in essentially the desert, because it's very
unless you're Jeff Sessions, and then you'll say it was Jesus who said, "Let them all die."
Yeah, okay, what Jesus said. Yeah, that kind of thing. And so let me see. I've got it's an Arizona-based group called No More Deaths. Okay. They said they were motivated by a deep sense of right and wrong, and basically they were leaving water jugs and canned food for dehydrated migrants crossing the terrain to get to the United States. They were convicted after a 3-day bench trial at a federal court in Tucson. And this story is from that I have is from January 20th. So this is one of the earlier ones. So this has been happening for a while and they've been using this not just to, go after this No More Deaths group, but also for people who are religiously motivated, who think that Jesus has called them. It's the verse that goes, "I was thirsty and you gave me water. I was hungry and you gave me," that kind of thing.
Yeah, the Matthew 25.
Yes. And the law, though, because some people are like, oh, well, is giving water to a migrant, is that illegal? And that's not the law that they prosecuted them for, but you can tell
You know what it reminds
was
me of?
motivated.
When people get arrested for giving homeless people food.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
But this is even worse because the law that they're saying that they violated is the national decision to maintain the refuge in its pristine nature. So basically, they're saying this is federal government land.
That's okay. That's what
It's an environmental offense. Yeah, is what they're trying to say is that it's an environmental offense. But at the same time, it's like it's very clear that this is motivated because I have not seen these particular magistrates get all up in arms about littering per se. It's only when people are leaving water that they're having issues.
Okay, yeah, that's why I couldn't understand exactly what they were quote charging them on. So it's an environmental issue, basically.
That's what and it's an environmental issue with this guy that they've just prosecuted and got a conviction on again. And this article from January 20th, they used that same law. But this is basically the law that these conservative border judges are using in order to criminalize people for giving water to children.
Yeah. Well, my article that I have, which is from Rewire, is from the 30th of May, so it's fairly recent. Let me see if I can find it again.
Yeah, I believe it's the same law that they're.
Yeah. Well,
they're enforcing.
See if I can find it.
Or regulation, I should say.
I don't.
But yeah, it's a bench. It was a bench trial for this one. I'm wondering if it was for this as well. Because I mean, I imagine
there's 2 more cases I'm aware of that are also in the courts for the.
I know one guy was convicted recently.
Yeah, I think this is Scott Daniel Warren. It said on Wednesday, May 29th, the trial of geologist Scott Daniel Warren began. Excuse me, I'm going to hiccup or burp, one of the two. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in federal penitentiary. What heinous crime did Warren commit to warrant such severe punishment? He exercised, now see, they focus in on this aspect, that he exercised his religious freedom to provide water, food, and clothing to those facing danger as they trekked across the desert. Warren had the audacity to take the words of Jesus literally, for I was hungry, as you mentioned, which is from Matthew 25. Warren encountered Kristen Perez Villeneuve and Jose Arnaldo, I can't say the last name, in the 860,000-acre Cabaza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge, where the two had lost their backpacks containing food and water while being chased by border agents. So, but it doesn't say anything about the environmental aspect.
Yeah, well, the law he was charged with is the same one, I believe. Somebody in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong or message me about it, but it's the same one because there's precedent for now targeting people for this, even though it's not binding law necessarily. You can take that, these prosecutors basically who don't like people that are helping. And again, it's you have prosecutorial discretion. And I think this is where, people say things like, oh, it doesn't matter who your prosecutor are. This is why it does matter. Because, you can make the argument that prosecutors uphold unjust laws and everything like that. But I mean, this is exactly what's happening here. Is the most unjust reasoning behind this, because clearly this law is intended to prevent. Oh, I'm back. Okay. It's clearly intended to prevent things like littering and sorry, I live in the fucking woods. So yes, the woods of Mississippi.
Broke into someone's house?
Yeah, I did. So yeah, they're using this law that was obviously meant to stop littering, to preserve, the national refuge and national parks, and twisting it to make it be like, oh, well, you can't give water to migrants.
I'm surprised the ACLU can't get involved then and say, look, you're not enforcing any other littering laws.
Well, you never know. I mean,
it's very difficult to prove that they're
For
I think the term would be kind of this malicious prosecution or this selective prosecution. It's very hard to prove because the prosecutor can literally give any reason as to why they prosecuted this case rather than others. He can say, well, I didn't think I'd get a conviction on the others. I didn't, you can literally make up anything. It's kind of like how, you're not supposed to racially discriminate for juries and that kind of thing.
But
everyone does it. Everyone uses race in their factor when they're selecting juries, because the standard is you can ask the other side when you notice it. You can say, I want a Batson hearing, but then literally the other attorney can give any reason for why it's not race-based.
Yeah.
You'd be like, I didn't like their shoes.
Yeah. I think one of the things that stood out, at least with this article, is that it goes, one reason I don't face a possible 20-year sentence while, oops, I must have missed something out. But possible 20-year sentence while Warren finds himself in this predicament is because two things have changed since the 2016 election. First is the Trump administration's zero tolerance for anything deemed to assist the undocumented, which we can
that's what it is, and that's basically what they're enforcing.
Zero tolerance was institutionalized in an April 11, 2017 memo from then Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who called for the disruption of organizations like No More Deaths. There appears to be an attempt to extend this administration's administrative crackdown to those providing humanitarian aid. And the second reason is this administration's emboldening of the Border Patrol, which retaliated for a report No More Deaths had released hours before Warren's arrest. The report charges Border Patrol agents with regular and widespread destruction of water supplies with little or no consequences.
Yeah, they'll dump out water because they want them to dehydrate and die in the desert. That is the thing that they are doing.
Yeah.
And it is one thing to be like, oh, well, even if you don't think that people should be coming in or whatever, like they are literally condemning people to die in the desert.
Yeah.
Which is, it's inhumane.
Going back to your littering aspect, I wonder if these Border Patrol agents that are dumping out the water are taking the jugs with them or just leaving the jugs there after they dump the water out, because they would be more littering in my mind than the people leaving the water. But yeah, I just found it kind of odd because I really couldn't figure out how they could prosecute this on a religious aspect, but it's really not being prosecuted on a religious.
It's not being prosecuted, but you could argue that they're not like you notice these Americans defending freedom, the freedombaldeagle.org, whatever they are, isn't coming in saying, oh, but very religious freedom. I think that's the point they're trying to make, is it's different. If you want to discriminate against people, oh yeah, these people will jump at the chance to defend you. But when it's somebody that's doing something actually beneficial, Alliance
and that's
freedom wants no part of it.
That's a lot of I think I posted in an article about a week ago, I think might even been concerning this case, was how organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom won't even touch this case with a 10-foot pole, when basically, this group, from what I can tell, are acting upon what they believe is religiously correct, and they're, being, quote, persecuted for it, for lack of a better word. But ADF has nothing to do with it, because ADF is against people of color as well. So it's like, and I think this is what was, now that I look at the article again, with now that I know what the actual law they're being tried under, why ADF won't touch it, because it doesn't.
It's a double standard. I mean,
it really is. In fact, they're talking of double standards. Bernal, oh crap, what's their last name? No Flowers to Gaze, the one that in Washington State. And I'm sitting reading through some of the articles concerning it, and how one of Baronel's things was, oh, she was forced to close her business. It's like, no, bitch, you closed it yourself. And where I have a wee bit of sympathy is that I think organizations like ADF, well, primarily ADF, latch onto these religious freedom cases, especially against same-sex marriage and you know the wedding cakes and all that stuff. They jump on these cases. Baronel has been one of their major, big time, I can't stress this enough, cash cow for them.
Mm-hmm.
All of their fundraising has been centered around her case and the bakery case out of Colorado. And of course they're going to appeal it, because if they don't, because Washington again stated that, no, you fucked up, you're liable for this shit, etc., etc. And her initial fine, when this first came down the pipes 5 years ago now, 7 years ago, this is how long it's been going on, I can't even remember, was only $1,000. And now her fine, well, with interest and a bunch of other shit, is like well into the 10,000s. But so something simple at the time was saying, admitting that, okay, I went against your thing, here's your $1,000, let's get beyond this, and I won't do it again. ADF jumps in and blows it out of proportion and convinces Baronel to, fight this, you're gonna win. And meanwhile, she's lost her business because she shut it down. And, if ADF wins or loses, which by all practical purposes looks like they're going, even if they go to the Supreme Court, because it's not the same as the Colorado case, where Colorado overstepped their bounds as far as criticizing Philip Jacks. The Washington department did not. This was strictly, you fucked up, end of story. Colorado overstepped their bounds and whatnot. It's not the same case. So I'm guessing Supreme Court won't touch this case. But she's going to be out all this money. I mean, granted, ADF is representing her, I guess, pro bono, so to speak. So she's not going to have to pay legal fees, but she's going to have to pay the two gentlemen that she discriminated against their legal fees. ADF ain't going to pay it. It's like, you're all over this case, but you're leaving this one here alone just because you agree with the fact that people migrating from South and Central America, are less than you. That's bullshit.
All right, I have a question for Morgan, actually.
Oh.
Given your legal expertise and your massive wealth of knowledge here, I reported on a news story this past week of a pastor, Jeffrey Vesta, up in Wisconsin. Now, when I report on all these pastors, priests, imams, and rabbis who get arrested for either sexually abusing children or having child pornography, I also include how much their bond was set at, because I think it's important to show how much they're having to pay if they're going to be out in the public again. Now, this one really bothered me. Jeffrey Vesta was released on a signatory bond, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. So I looked it up, and he just had to sign a paper promising to come to court. He got arrested for owning child pornography. They raided his home. They found it, arrested him. And you're telling me that the court said, all right, just promise you'll come back. You don't even have to pay anything. What determines the bond amount?
Yeah. So, hang on one second. Yeah. Okay. So, the thing with bond is a lot of people, they get, kind of up in arms about for a variety of reasons. Now, there are cases where, it is crazy. And then you look at the disparities that are, how different people are treated by the same justice system for often the same crimes. So with bond, how you're supposed to do it constitutionally, which, spoiler alert, Nobody does. When I was at MacArthur Justice, we worked with these different cities across Mississippi to get them to basically do it correctly under the proper standards for bail. So the preference is that you are released on your own recognizance. So essentially, kind of like this signatory bond, like basically you get out of your own accord. But there are some cases where you can. And they have to consider, they're supposed to consider, how much you're able to pay. So basically, how much, sometimes your release of your own recognizance is, should be the standard, but then sometimes they're like, okay, well, we'll set the bond for an amount that'll make sure they come back because that bond money's gone. So like, say they set it for $1 million, like, I would damn well make sure I came back if I had to pay $1 million if it didn't show up, like, so that way you have some skin in the game to an extent. Now, there are some people, though, that you can say they should not be granted bond because of, the reasons that you're not supposed to be given bond, or that the judge can determine you shouldn't be given bond, is that you are a danger to the community, which I would say in this case, if you're a child predator and given their history of reoffending, you should be. You're a danger to the community, you should not be given bond. Even if it's, and some people will say, oh, well, isn't that assuming he's guilty, whatever. They don't consider, that doesn't come into that yet. That comes into based on in light of what the charges are, would they be a danger to the community, if this were proven true, essentially. Another reason is if you're, you'll hear the term flight risk. So that means that basically if somebody very, very wealthy, usually, if it's likely that they're going to, or that they've, tried to evade justice before, if it's likely they'll flee. And, with child pornography charges also, that's another one where, you would be likely to flee. So, I mean, look at, Jeffrey Epstein, Roman Polanski, that kind of thing, when it comes to those kinds of things, people who are wealthy obviously have been able to, hop on a flight and get to a country where there's no extradition agreement, essentially. So,
but what bothers me is the fact that kids are involved. And I feel like when kids are involved, there should be no bond.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of that's what I think should be the standard, because it's clear that you have been accused. What you've been accused of is preying on some of the most vulnerable people in the community. Mm-hmm. And the likeliness of it continuing, especially if you've been accused of, pedophilia or child pornography, it should be no bond. And the fact that it was signatory too is also mind-boggling, because
pastor in Wisconsin. This is the first time, because I've in the past 3 years I've reported on over 300 pastors, priests, and moms, etc., who are accused of sexually abusing children and whatnot. This is the very first time I've seen signatory bond. That's why I had to look it up and find out what it was, and it just blew my mind. How in the world did this pastor get to go free?
Well, it's just like,
usually $500 is what is done for like petty misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Even that, if it's like a petty misdemeanor, it's $500. I know that for, public drunk here, it's about, 1,500, which I think is outrageous, but whatever. It's completely, and you're supposed to take into account, again, like the person's ability to pay, what would be, an amount of money that would make him come back. But
on the flip side of that, the leader of the La Luz del Mundo church, over 1 million members of this church, he got arrested in California last week for child abuse, sexual child abuse, and trafficking. His bail was set at 25, or bond was set at $25 million.
Yeah,
that's part of the reason his bond was so high is because he has access.
Right, and I get how there are different levels in terms of their wealth and their risk, but again, I think it should just all be the same. No bond when it comes to kids.
Well, part of the problem is, and there was a case 2 weeks ago that I posted about where the guy was found guilty of, and this was a minister or somebody within, like a church elder, was found guilty, and I think the standard time was 3 years. He was given fucking probation because he's such a godly man. That was
and that happens
that
too.
was-
But yeah, the bond is it should be you get no bond because you're a danger to children or likely to present a danger to a child if you were to be released based on these charges.
Yeah.
That should be the standard. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's outrageous. And I would love to know what kind of bail this same judge has given to other people of lesser crimes.
Well,
I bet you it's more. It always is more.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I've been tracking the whole diddling priest thing for, God, now 7 years, 8 years. I lost count, and a majority of the time, I mean, for the most part, judges have been pretty strict. But every now and then you get a case that is like, what the fuck is this judge thinking? And then you dig into their background and you find out that he's a fucking religious nutter too. And
what bothers me is that either there's a level of favoritism towards religion,
Yes.
or what also is potentially happening is that they're intentionally setting the bond at an amount that they can pay in the hopes that they don't have to give the money back. And that also bothers me because you're possibly putting kids at risk just to try and get some extra money from this bond.
Well, I think part of the thing I've noticed over the years that I've been tracking this is that regardless of your standing within the community, whether you're a judge or just an average Joe Blow or a minister or an elder, whatever within the community, is that too many people still consider their children chattel property. Basically, if you're under 18, they don't give a flying fuck about you. And it shows. Because,
and if you're not a fetus.
Yeah. Well, yeah, then you can throw that into the mix too. Yeah, basically it goes down to the whole notion that the children don't matter per se, in the fact that they're property. You can do whatever you want with them. You find that especially within the anti-vax community, but especially within the religious community, not all of them.
Yeah, but you see that argument for like the corporal punishment stuff. Like, I'll beat the hell out of my child. I don't care what your science or whatever says about their development. They're my children.
My children, I can do what I want with them.
I can do whatever hell I want to. Yeah.
That attitude is very pervasive and
child endangerment.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it is.
I know I think it was who years ago actually published a child's rights document stating these are what we consider the rights of children. Children have rights, basically. And part of the reason why many political pundits are trying to get away from the World Health Organization is because of this document, because they refuse to sign it. It's like, no, children don't have rights, they're property.
Yeah.
And it pervades all levels of society. It doesn't matter whether you're religious, non-religious, or not. I mean, I grew up with, spare the rod, spoil the child. I mean, my dad used to beat the fuck out of me. But it was corporal punishment back then. So, yeah. And it's very, very pervasive. It seems like everything, well, science, for lack of a better word, says, like spanking is not a good idea. I'll spank my child if I want to, like Morgan said. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sick. But it was like, well, the other day I got in an discussion, an argument, because I missed it. I was at work, and then the chick blocked me after she made the comment, so it was everybody else defending me. Basically, because I highlight on my blog the various cases, whether it's Christian, non-Christian, it doesn't matter. Anything that has any type of religious overtones to it, about people that claim religion but still, sexually abuse their children and use religion as a justification or such, and how I was calling out somebody who is saying, oh, you're no better than the anti-vax community, when she's doing the exact same thing. and I called on, oh, you're hypocritic. You point out all this stuff. It's like, and your point is, I pointed out because it's wrong. There's no hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I'm not judging because I am very well aware of the statistics of child sexual abuse. There is no difference. It's like a 60-40 split between secular and religious. Although some have it as a 50-50, literally 50-50 split, but they are finding more cases that are, they won't say religiously motivated, but religion is in the background of why.
Yeah, because it's a position that people trust. People, they trust their pastors, they trust, whatever, as opposed to, secular positions, you're not going to necessarily have that amount of influence and power over people, because when you're claiming to literally be, whether you're claiming to be basically someone in direct contact with God, or a man that is close, or a person that's close with God, who are you to question them? Is the whole thing. And they also have access to children. I mean, that's why they seek these jobs, because you have unfettered access. You're not held accountable. You're held to different, you're on a pedestal. Nobody's going to say anything against you, because if you do, then what does that make you if you speak out against a person that's of God?
And the most important point is that they have a pedestal.
Yeah.
And what this person was driving at, and I've get this criticism quite a bit, is that what right do I have to call out the religious folk for abusing children when a secular folk do it the same amount? As I said, 60-40. Well, the problem is most that do not claim a religion do not claim moral superiority, whereas the religious folk, for the most part, implicitly claim moral superiority because they're, quote, whatever religion they are.
On the last episode of Atheist News, I have a troll that likes to come on and make arguments like that.
Yeah.
And I explained to him, I was like, look, I report on these pastors and priests and imams and rabbis, all these religious leaders who are getting arrested for sexually abusing children. And he was like, well, why don't you report on atheists? I was like, I do report on atheists when they get accused of things. I reported on David Silverman of American Atheists. I reported on Lawrence Krauss when he was accused. I report on atheists who are considered leaders in the atheist community, whether it's good or bad. And the big difference is that I'm not reporting on atheists who are just regular people who commit crimes in the same way I don't report on religious people who are just regular people who commit crimes. Because if I did that, I would be reporting on every single crime on earth, because either you're one or the other.
Yeah, and it's not people in just regular average Joes, like you said. These are people with positions of power that they are exploiting.
Yeah, and many of them are using that power as justification for their wrongdoing, saying, well, you have no right to judge me because my only judge has higher moral authority than you, and I don't buy that position. If you're going to claim that you're such a goody two-shoes because of whatever religion you practice, and then you go and do something as heinous as diddling a child, yeah, I'm going to have a problem with it just as much as I'm going to have a problem with somebody within the secular world does it. But, and this is the caveat I always make, is that yes, there are people within the non-religious community. It doesn't necessarily mean they're atheists or anything. The crimes do occur, but they're not using religion as a shield. They're not using it to morally justify. They're sick people. And I'm not saying these people aren't sick, but on top of them being sick, they're using religion to hide behind it in some way, shape, or form. I mean, every case is different, so making a broad sweeping statement is a little difficult. But all one has to do is look at the Catholic Church. They have institutionalized not only diddling priests, now they are trying to sweep it away, saying that it's because they're fucking gay. I'm sorry, but yeah, there are
Don't get me started on Thomas Tobin last week very, very rarely do I drop an F-bomb on Atheist News. I said, after Thomas Tobin said, don't support pride parades, that, you're harming children when you do that. I said, fucking rich, coming from a Catholic bishop. I was like, are you?
Well, Tubin's yeah, he's a piece of work. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the child sexual abuse is pretty much institutionalized within the Catholic Church, not within the religion, but within the church institution. But what makes it even more egregious is that the Catholic Church has actively tried to hide these crimes. And they are still actively trying to prevent the victims of these crimes to get restitution. Or,
that was another news I had on this weekend show was how USA Today recently put together that they've spent over $10 million in the Northeast U.S. in just
to suppress the laws.
To suppress these laws. I was like, how is this happening? They are literally using their money to influence legislation. I don't care if other groups can lobby. This is like absolutely absurd because this is a religious organization doing this lobbying.
Well, and it's doing it for a purpose, and it's because they know that they've done it.
Mm-hmm.
They know their members that they have put in positions of power are doing it. Otherwise, they would say, you know what, let the truth come out because you know what, wouldn't they believe that God would see to the right outcome?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, I said it was
if they were so innocent.
CBS News.
Yeah. Well, and that's what makes it I mean, I'm picking on the Catholic Church, but it's now coming out that I'm going to say Southern Baptist Convention, don't quote me on that because I might have the organization wrong, is doing the same tactics as the Catholic Church is doing.
Oh, yeah.
So there is
Houston Chronicle that's doing the work on that.
Houston Chronicle is doing exceptional work on it. I highlighted a couple of their postings, but it's a problem. And whether it's because these individuals, for lack of a better word, are mentally ill and are drawn to this occupation, or because they are, especially within the Catholic Church, because sexuality is such a means of control, celibate priests, stuff like that, who knows? But yeah, it's a problem both secular and non-secular, but majority of the time from what I've seen.
I mean, don't get me started, because if American Atheists had suddenly had this big news story where they were blocking news of their members sexually abusing children. It's like, can you talk about a night and day difference on how that's reported?
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And regretfully, it's so built into our society and to our culture, especially here in the US, that combating it is really difficult, especially when you have one of the richest or the richest organization in the world fighting against you.
On the last Atheist Hall of Fame I did two weeks ago, I inducted George Carlin into the Atheist Hall of Fame, and he had plenty
of
material about the Catholic Church because he came from a Catholic background when he was a kid. And and he was doing stand-up on this back in the 90s, the 80s, all about this long before the Spotlight team, long before any of these other big organizations revealed this to the bigger public. And we're talking about Carlin, who had millions of followers, and it still just didn't catch on. And it blew my mind.
Well, I think what is really strikes home for me is that, especially with the recent PA AG report that came out last year, and now other states are doing it, and they're finding hundreds of victims.
Oh, yeah.
And I got into a discussion. In fact, I think Deb was in on it with me too. And this guy was like, "Oh, Catholic Church, this, that, and another thing." And it's like, well, if you're tithing, where do you think your fucking money's going? I said, you're just as guilty as the priest because you are financially supporting. I said, most of the money you have tithed has probably gone to their lobbying efforts or their legal funds to defend
pay
themselves.
out settle the
Yeah,
pennies
settlements. Thank you.
that they give the victims. I mean, it's absolutely outlandish, because I mean, it is. I mean, who wants to go through a trial like that? I mean, having all these memories dragged up in front of everybody. So, yeah, most people are going to settle. That's how most lawsuits end.
Yeah.
I mean, and my firm, most of our cases settle. It doesn't mean that someone did something wrong or whatever necessarily. I mean, it's not cases of this degree. We're not we're dealing with this kind of abuse or any abuse really. It's just car wrecks. But yeah, so it's. But I mean, the amount of compensation compared to the suffering, it's just, and the amount of wealth that the Catholic Church has is, I mean,
Well, look at
it's a slap in the face.
Look at Sam Nasser's victims. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a quote, basically non-religious case. I mean, some of our top female gymnasts were victims of that creep. I mean, so it's not just the Catholic Church. I mean, it's occurring everywhere. But the difference is now, granted, Michigan was a little slow in their response, and I guess Ohio State's now embroiled in a very similar situation. It's just people just are not taking the implications seriously of what such abuse can do to an individual, especially a child.
Well, another thing that's bothering me is about the Catholic Church is the internal investigations that are going on. They keep saying, "Oh, we're doing internal investigations," and then
what internal investigations?
The Catholic Church themselves, they're saying, "Oh, you don't need to investigate us. We're going to do an internal investigation," and they'll release a list of priests that have long either died or are in their 90s that there's no way there's going to be any convictions. And one recent case really, really made me happy, and that was the New York Attorney General, who said, "Don't bother with your internal investigation. We're investigating."
That's where I was going. I was being snarky. I don't think you caught it, but yeah, I mean, the internal investigation, whether by the Catholic Church or any church or organization, are fucking bullshit. They're doing that again, Morgan.
Morgan's eating Pringles in front of the microphone.
Yeah, she's been having equipment issues of late, so.
Well, no! She said she lives in the woods.
Well, she lives in that landmass between Mobile and in New Orleans. Did I get that right?
Okay, so we can ask yes or no questions to Morgan.
Yeah. She was joking a while back how anytime they report on stuff in Mississippi, and shake your head if I'm getting this wrong, that they always refer to Mississippi as the landmass between Mobile and New Orleans. And so it's always stuck in my mind. I have a warped.
Now Morgan is really going to hone her miming skills. Morgan. She's in a box. She's swimming. No, she's fighting a pterodactyl?
People wonder why I like doing Beyond the Trailer Park, because yeah, okay, we can bullshit all we want, but this is the fun part. We can pick on our mute co-hosts.
All right, now here's where I'm going to talk about the law, and I'm going to get every single fact wrong, and Morgan's going to be screaming and unable to. All right, so if you disguise yourself as a bailiff, I heard that you can secretly go into a courtroom and pretend to be a bailiff the whole time and then just shout, "Where's the Kool-Aid?" And then they'll give you Kool-Aid. Is that correct, Morgan? She's shaking her head, yes. For the podcast listeners, she's shaking her head, yes, this is absolutely true. I encourage everyone, go out there, get your bailiff uniform rented, because you're probably only going to want to do this the one time. No need to buy it.
You'll probably get arrested after the one time, so you won't be able to afford to buy it.
That's where you get the police uniform.
Yeah. Oh no, she's laughing hysterically, and we really don't know what about. But
yeah,
well,
probably the real owners of the house she's in have come in and discovered her.
Uh-oh. I don't know if she's in a house or an apartment building. Are you in an apartment building? Okay, I didn't think.
Loud neighbors?
I don't think she's home enough to know.
Um,
But yeah, the only two remaining pieces, and they're kind of, well, one isn't minor, but Facebook removes conspiracy site Natural News. I was never so happy in my. I couldn't figure out, because I found out about this after it happened, but I do subscribe to Natural News because I like to see what bullshit like Adams comes up with, and I couldn't understand why my feed was kind of quiet. Now I know why, because Facebook got rid of him. But he's still on the web, so I mean, it's a way. Yeah, if people want to find them, they're gonna find them. Same thing with Alex Jones, and it's the usual arguments that concerning removing Alex Jones with the censorship, but as I've always stated, it's no different. I mean, Facebook is a private company. They're not governmentally owned. While it may be censorship to some degree,
all right, here's my idea to turn that around on the atheist community. My idea is to gather up several people from YouTube who do YouTube shows or podcasts or anything like that. Bring them all to our own website where people can't firebomb them, flag them, nonstop trolls. Bring them all to a separate website and just charge people $5 a year for access. And they'll have all these atheists that they can listen to and watch, and they won't have to worry about all of a sudden my channel getting completely removed by YouTube or something like that. And a $5 per year would be nothing for one person. And then you could split that revenue with all the people who are doing this stuff for free.
Yeah. Well, my whole thing is basically I have no problem with people spouting their bullshit. My problem is when you're spouting outright lies. And the biggest thing for example, is the issue with the measles epidemic. I mean, you have people like Andrew Rayfield, people like Tommy and Del Bigtree, going around to specific communities saying that vaccines are bad. We've seen this with the Somali community in Minnesota. We've seen it with the Hasidic Jew communities in New York, New Jersey. I mean, what they spout are lies concerning vaccines. Okay. Now, the conspiracy stuff, unless you cross the Sandy Hook line where you're doxing individual families, fine, go ahead, spout all you want, but you don't have my platform to do it on.
Right.
You can make your own website if your ISP or your website allows you to do that, so be it. But it would be just like me allowing somebody that I don't agree with, who I know is spouting outright lies, and I'm talking outright lies, not opinion.
Now, the problem I have is the dangers to the overall community that these misinformation is causing dangers to these communities. And the court system is going up and down. Now, in New York, they issued the quarantines and those counties, and a judge overruled it and said, no, these kids have to go to school regardless of whether or not they're vaccinated in the middle of an outbreak. it's like, how is the overall safety not as important, you know? But on the flip side, on the last episode of Atheist News, I reported on how Maine just passed a law saying, no, you have to get vaccinated because they're in the middle of 3 different counties have pertussis outbreaks
Right.
because of how many people aren't getting vaccinated. So it's going back and forth in terms of, I think the smaller states have a better chance of passing legislation to protect people. However, the problem is most of the smaller states are conservative states where they're not going to bother doing that. The larger states are going to have problems just because of how much more effort it takes to pass something.
Yeah.
New York.
When it comes to community health, I don't think there should be any question as to, who to listen to. And the thing is, I mean, just like, using the Monsanto award in the cancer case, I mean, the court system is not designed to science. I mean, that's left up to our scientists who hopefully, and in the case of vaccines, especially, it's been proven time and time and time again. There's over.
It's like, what's the point of an expert witness in a case if you're not going to listen to the expert
Exactly.
witness?
I mean, I know when I got MRSA a couple years ago, and I got what's called community associated MRSA. In other words, I caught it from somebody else. Basically, I worked, as a cashier, so I was handling money. And what I found out after the fact was that there were a couple individuals within my community who also had MRSA, either refused treatment, probably due to cost, is my guess. They didn't have insurance, so they really couldn't go on the antibiotics for it, passed it to me. I know one case where the person outright refused. They were basically what we call crunchy moms. Didn't believe in using the antibiotics. Legally, there's really not much I could do unless I got some organization that would represent me pro bono to, say, hey, I got it from you, and you gave it to me because you refused to follow medicine.
Yeah, that's what bothers me, is that there is an awareness of the risk that they're posing to others, and yet
they don't care.
That's like me swinging nunchucks and walking along the sidewalk and not getting in trouble for it. It's like, yeah, there's a risk, but it's my right. I can do it, and it's not my fault if you get a stray hit in the nuts.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, I've seen numerous discussions online where basically the bottom line was, I don't really give a fuck what other people think. This is my right. I'm going to do it this way, whether it's right or wrong.
The thing is, though, with can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thing is with you say going after somebody, who has gotten you sick. It's very it can be difficult and very expensive to tell, especially in an outbreak, oh, this person gave me it.
Right.
So it's hard to do that, but I mean, and then you get into weird, legal things, because it's like we haven't had this legal argument before, because I mean, when the polio vaccine went, before they even knew for sure that it worked, they were like, hey, we've got 1 million of these vaccines, we think they might work, and 1 million parents were immediately like, I'm going to get one.
Well, yeah,
that's how desperate people were. And so this whole like, oh, well, I don't want these vaccines. And I think it's this idea that, well, my child's special and I don't want them to have the same chemicals injected in her as, poor children. But
part of it too,
entitlement.
One argument I have seen is that vaccines have become the victim of their own efficacy. In other words, they work so well that we don't remember. I mean,
well, on the last episode of Science News, the malaria vaccine is going out right now to 3 countries in Africa, and it's because there's a definite need. And this vaccine, it's the first ever of its kind. It only works in about 4 out of every 10 people. But that doesn't matter because 4 out of 10 people is still a huge improvement to what it is now.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. For me, I was at the tail end of when polio, even though we had the vaccine, I mean, we by that time had almost 25 years. This was the early 70s. I remember having classmates in school who were there 1 year and not the next because we found out they got polio, even though they had the vaccine. And it was before
Herd immunity.
Well, no, it was before it became like, I remember getting shots every year in school. I still have the scar somewhere on my arm. If you can find it behind my other scars. From when I got in fact, it was polio. And I think it was the tail end of smallpox, but I don't remember. But I remember getting the vaccines in school.
You know what helped a lot of the population over the course of the couple decades following these vaccines was, believe it or not, military service, because people in the military had to get these vaccines. They didn't have a choice. It was mandatory. And not only that, but they would stand in opposite lines after they got their shots and punch each other in the arm as a way of like congratulating each other in the most painful way imaginable.
Yeah, punching injections, like,
yeah.
I know how my arm feels after I get the flu shot. It's like, why is my arm sore?
It's an example of how mandatory vaccines for one group that probably wouldn't have gotten it before really helped build up to that level of herd immunity.
Yeah.
Oh, and another example is, so one thing Mississippi does correctly, we allow no religious and no philosophical exemptions to vaccinations.
Yeah, and Maine just passed that law last week.
Yeah, West Virginia has that law as well. So we have a 99.8%, except for kids who have, the mitochondrial disorder, right. And, kids who are having chemo, that kind of thing. Obviously they can't get these vaccines, but, they're protected. Somebody from Tennessee came down to Mississippi and they had measles.
Yes.
And they traced it. The CDC traced where they went, everything. No one in Mississippi got measles.
Yeah.
But some other people in Tennessee did.
Yeah.
But the thing is, once you're, crossing state lines and you're causing this kind of thing, it's like, how much can that herd immunity last? Especially if you're having a bunch of people who aren't vaccinated coming in, what if it's more than one person, if it's like a whole group of people, or.
Well, just in the last week, I've gotten alerts for Dallas, Fort Worth, LAX, I want to say O'Hare, but there were like 5 different regional airports that sent out alerts to their customers that, we had a measles case walk through that was contagious. So
and we could have eradicated it. It's the thing that pisses me off. We had the chance.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, what was it, 1980? No, that doesn't sound right. Basically, measles was eradicated from the U.S.
It was eradicated from the U.S., and then they were going to eradicate it worldwide, but people were stupid.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So,
and that's actually how these outbreaks that are happening in Washington State and New York State are happening, is because it's a lot of Russian communities, Orthodox Russian communities, and Jewish communities that are being affected by it because they're coming from Israel and they're coming from Russia, and they're bringing it with them to these extended families in these states who don't have the vaccine.
Yeah. And that's why, losing a site like Natural News is, I'm crying no tears that it's gone. Yeah, it was fun to read some of the bullshit he posted, but when you have, people specifically targeting communities like the Hasidic community and the Somali community, and a lot of it is because of the language barrier, they're not understanding, and also education level, they're not understanding the significance of getting these vaccines. And it's like, I mean, other than when I had no insurance, I kept up on my vaccines. I have to because but I am diabetic. I have a lower immune system. I mean, a case of measles would probably drive me absolutely insane if it stayed minor, but measles can kill. I mean, my mom was deaf because of measles. She, got it when she was a kid before the vaccine even existed, and lost her hearing because of it. I mean, it has ramifications, but as I said, I think vaccination has become a victim of its own success because, you know, I barely remember some of the things. I remember chickenpox, and I do remember measles. I remember having the MMR came out the year I went to college in 1982.
You know what bothers me is a meme I saw the other day that basically said in the 60s, scientists were like, we're going to put a man on the moon. And today, scientists are going, the Earth is round.
Yes, I saw that as well.
To me, it's like, how much time are they wasting on stuff that shouldn't be a problem?
It's like the autism vaccine thing. They've done the same study over and over and over, and they could be, developing new vaccines.
Yeah. Really?
Like for different diseases, but instead they're having to, go back to the basics and be like, okay, we'll do one more study, and even though no one's gonna care, yeah, it's
well,
bonkers.
I think going back to the whole autism vaccine link, I mean, Fake Field set the
Fake field
community, the scientific community, back bare minimum 20 years. Some are saying 25, 30 years, because they are now possibly seeing a link between the gut biome and autism. 25 years ago, but people wouldn't touch it because of his fraud. And we're 25 years behind on that. I have 175 papers in my files refuting the vaccine autism link. I have none that are saying that vaccine caused autism. Zero. There are no legitimate papers stating that fact. And there's, I think, 10,000 or more along the same vein, saying that vaccines do not cause autism. I mean, like you said, Morgan, how long? I mean, we just had a study published, 6 months ago?
I mean, I feel like there's one every 6 months at this point. I feel like there's one every 6 months. It's like, once again, vaccines don't cause autism, and also the fact that it shows what they think about people with autism. That they would rather their child get polio than autism.
Yeah, and
like,
and
what the fuck?
yeah, and that's a big issue that I've noticed. Like, I've been going through my science feeds, which I do like once a week, or try to, and I've seen numerous articles from individuals that have autism, or who are autistic. I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. Who are saying, would you quit using us as an example?
Yeah.
As much as I hate to say it, autistic lives matter. I mean, it's like these people, that have, basically are dishing on those that are autistic. I have an autistic nephew. I have a friend who has an autistic child, very autistic, to the point where, he, for lack of a better term, he would be termed regressive autism. But she's a nurse, and no, vaccine does not cause his autism. I mean, he's like, 23 now? I have other friends who are on the spectrum themselves in various degrees. And all of them are, contribute to society in some manner or another. Some can't, obviously, but those that can do. I know some that are authors. I mean, if you want to pick a famous name, Graydon Temple. I mean, there's There's a whole bunch of them. I mean, yeah, this comparison that autistic people are shit is bullshit. And I'm glad to see that finally some are speaking up, even more so now than before. But it's really disgusting, which brings us into another point. You know, anti-vaccine activists link itself to the women's movement, Me Too. It's like, yeah, they're just grasping at straws. Someone's typing away.
Right, let me bring my microphone even closer to Morgan's keyboard.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah, I'm having equipment issues all around. It's great.
Yeah. But we're pretty much to the end. So, Steve, tell us where we can find you.
You can find me on Atheist News on YouTube. It's very easy to find. It's youtube.com/c/Atheist News. And of course, the C stands for channel. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter as well, Atheist News Show. Again, very easy to find. Every other week I post Atheist News, just going over what's happening in the world in regards to religion and atheism. And on the off weeks, I post basically several other videos. Just depends on what I feel like doing. I have an Atheist Hall of Fame I do once every 4 months, or 3 months, I'm sorry, so 4 times a year. I have Atheist Adventurer, where I profile a country and their history of religion and atheism throughout the years. I've done 6 of those videos, such as, Atheist Adventurer Egypt, where I go over their history of, the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, and to where they are today with the Muslims and Coptic Christians. I have the history series. My most recent series was on the history of blasphemy, and all the instances throughout history regards to that, and laws and terrorist attacks and everything. I have Godsmacked, a new series I started in the past year, where I profile a specific god in a certain religion. I've done Ares, Brigid, Camazotz, Dagon, Elohim. I'm basically going alphabetically with that series. I don't know why I started that, but and I do science versus religion on, what does science say about a certain topic? What does religion say about a certain topic, such as the Great Flood? Religions around the world say that there was a Great Flood. Science, however, says there was never a Great Flood. It's just that flooding happens everywhere in the world, and religions apply it to their own myths. So, yeah, I have a lot of different content I provide.
Hey, the more the merrier.
Oh, yeah, it's just, for me, it's a matter of too much I want to do and not enough time to do it all.
Yeah, that's the problem I'm running into, is like, oh, I want to write about that. I got to finish this first. It's like, yeah, and most of them are information gathering intensive. I hate using the word research intensive, but I have to, if I'm debunking, I'll have to read every study the person cites, and she who will remain nameless is notorious for this. They'll cite a study, say the study says this, you go and read the study, and the study says the exact fucking opposite. So it's like, I'm working on a piece now that I've read probably 14 different studies, and it's like not one of them support the claims being made. So, and Miss Morgan, where can we find you?
All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mostring. That's MOSTRING. You can also find me on Instagram under Mostring, MOSTRING. And you can also find me on Facebook on Morgan L. Stringer.
Excellent. And just an FYI, I did put Steve's YouTube link and his Twitter account in the show note or the show description, so you can click there to find him on YouTube. I didn't put your Facebook because I didn't know if you wanted that out there. So, and Sammy couldn't be with us tonight. She had to work again, which brings us to this bit of news. We are going to go back to our 9:30 start time starting next show. I don't know yet if we're going to do next week because we would like to cover Project Blitz. It's been popping up in the news more and more. The general news, besides, for those of us that follow the...
Yeah, Kelly did an excellent podcast on queer-splaining about Project Blitz.
Yeah, so if you want to
check out.
Yeah, if you want to get a heads up on what we're going to be talking about, because I don't know yet because I haven't worked on an outline yet. And we are going to have Steve back on for that show because he's also done stuff on Project Blitz. Mm-hmm. But we are going back to 9:30, at least temporarily, because Sam's work schedule got changed. I can't do another day. This is the only day off I have consistently because we're closed unless we change our hours to opening on Mondays. So I can't really, unless you guys want to be doing this at 12:30 in the morning, don't foresee changing of a day unless I can talk them into consistently giving me another day off, which I highly doubt, because if we were open on Mondays, I'd probably be working too. So starting next week or the week after, when we have our next show, we will be going back to 9:30, and I'll post that in the as a reminder. But it may be temporary, it may be permanent for a while. So if you can't listen live, understandable, do download if you want to listen to us babble about insane stuff. So, but yeah, Project Blitz is up coming up. I think that's going to be our next big one. And then just an update, the Nixium trial is still going on with Keith Raniere, and it's a clusterfuck. I have never seen... If he's not found guilty, I'd be shocked. But, I mean, everybody else has pled guilty, so I don't foresee him getting away scot-free. So it'll be interesting. But that is one wild trial. So I'll be posting an update in the next couple days about that. So easiest way to find me is on Twitter, Dune9998. I'm more likely to find a direct message there than I am on Facebook because I get too many notifications. But you can find me also on Facebook at Bethany Hambridge. If you send a friend request, just say show related so I don't ignore you. And you can find me on YouTube, but I haven't put out any new content in a while. I'm having tech issues, I think. It's the best way to explain it. And I just haven't had time to...
What does that mean? Like Terminator's out on your lawn or something?
Yeah. Well, my XSplit went wonky, and I don't know why, and I don't have enough tech knowledge to figure out what the fuck went wrong with it, and I just haven't had the time because we're...
Well, tech issues is just so vague.
Well, because it's vague for a reason because I have no clue. I mean, all of this, I'm still on a learning curve, and because of work, because I work in the restaurant industry, so I'm kind of like available 24/7, even when I'm not working, and which is fine. I mean, the joy of living above your workplace, but we're in graduation mode. The beginning, fishing season's now in full bore, and all the festivals and all that shit. So we kind of get busy at unexpected times, and we're shorthanded, so I get called in a lot. And plus, I've been sleeping like there's no tomorrow. I slept all day today. I didn't get out of bed till 4:30. I tried 4 other times, but it didn't work. Ended up going back to bed. So, but yeah, you can find me on Facebook, easiest way. I don't know yet for sure if we're going to have a show next week. As I said, the Project Blitz research is probably going to take us extra week to pull everything all together because all 3 of us work. All 3 of us actually have a life outside of Beyond the Trailer Park, where before we could come in and pretty much shoot the shit. Yeah, now I gotta do some more of the research where, it was split up between Deb and I, so it's a little harder when it's one of us. And I know Morgan works and Sammy works, so see how it goes. But until next time, I bid you all a good evening. Stay safe and all that fun shit, because I know we're going into tornado seasons in parts of the country. Nobody get flooded out. And y'all have a good night. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace, y'all.